My own family voted me out of the company I spent 35 years building from nothing. What they didn't realize was that I still held all the legal cards, and their comfortable lives were about to come crashing down. My name is Linda MacGragor. I'm 67 years old, and this is my story. MacGragor and Associates didn't start as a family business. It started as a desperate woman's last resort. In 1989, I was 32 years old, recently divorced, and struggling to support my 2 young children, Michael and Sarah, on a secretary's salary. My ex-husband had left us with nothing but debt and broken promises, and I was facing the very real possibility of losing our small apartment. That's when I discovered I had a talent for bookkeeping and small business consulting. It started with helping my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, organize the finances for her family's restaurant. She was drowning in receipts and tax forms, and I spent 3 evenings helping her create a system that made sense. When she tried to pay me, I almost refused. It felt like helping a friend, not work. But Mrs. Chen insisted, pressing $200 into my hands. "Linda, you saved my business. This is worth much more than money, but it's all I can afford right now." That $200 was more than I made in a week at my secretarial job. More importantly, it showed me that I had skills people were willing to pay for. Within a month, Mrs. Chen had referred 3 other small business owners to me. Within 6 months, I was making more from evening and weekend consulting than from my day job. I'll never forget the day I quit my secretarial position. My boss, Mr. Patterson, looked at me like I was insane. "Linda, you're throwing away job security for what? Helping people with their books. That's not a real career." But it was real to me. It was the difference between scraping by and building something for my children's future. I rented a tiny office above a bakery on Main Street, hung out a simple sign that read MacGragor and Associates, Small Business Solutions, and prayed I could make it work. The early years were brutal. I worked 12-hour days, often bringing Michael and Sarah to the office after school because I couldn't afford childcare. They would do their homework at the small table in my office, while I helped clients understand profit and loss statements, set up payroll systems, and navigate tax requirements. Sarah, who was 8 at the time, became my unofficial filing assistant, organizing receipts while Michael, 10, would answer the phone with his serious little voice. "MacGragor and Associates. How may I help you?" Those children saw me build something from nothing. They watched me take on clients who couldn't pay much, work weekends to meet deadlines, and slowly, methodically, grow a reputation for honest, reliable service. They saw me cry when we lost a big client, and they celebrated with ice cream when we landed our first corporate account by 1995, 6 years after starting. MacGragor and Associates had grown from my kitchen table operation to a legitimate business, with 4 employees and a proper office building. We specialized in helping small and medium-sized businesses with their financial management, tax preparation, and business planning. I had developed a reputation for taking on challenging cases, businesses that were struggling, family companies with complicated structures, startups that needed guidance. Michael was 16 and Sarah was 14 when I first started talking to them seriously about the business. "This company is our family's future," I told them. "Everything I'm building is for you too. Someday, if you want it, this could be yours." Michael showed immediate interest. He was good with numbers, detail-oriented, and had inherited my stubborn streak when it came to solving problems. He started working part-time at the office during high school, learning the basics of bookkeeping and client relations. Sarah was more interested in the marketing and client development side, showing a natural talent for explaining complex financial concepts in ways that made sense to worried business owners. When Michael graduated high school, I offered to pay for his college education on one condition: he had to study business or accounting, and he had to commit to working for MacGragor and Associates for at least 5 years after graduation. It wasn't about controlling his future. It was about ensuring the business I was building had continuity and family involvement. "Mom, I want to be part of this," he told me. "I've watched you build something amazing. I want to help make it even better." Sarah made the same commitment 2 years later. By 2003, both of my children were college graduates working full-time for the family business. Michael had his CPA license and was handling our more complex corporate clients. Sarah had developed our marketing strategy and was bringing in new business at a rate that amazed me. The business continued to grow throughout the 2000s. We moved to a larger building, hired more staff, and expanded our services to include business valuations and merger consulting. By 2010, MacGragor and Associates was one of the most respected small business consulting firms in the region, with annual revenues exceeding $2.8 million. But success brought new challenges, particularly around family dynamics and business ownership. As Michael and Sarah became more involved in day-to-day operations, they began to have opinions about the direction of the company that didn't always align with mine. The first real conflict came in 2012 when Michael proposed that we should incorporate and issue formal stock shares to family members. "Mom, we need to modernize the ownership structure. Right now, everything is in your name personally. If something happens to you, the business could be tied up in probate for months." He wasn't wrong about the legal vulnerabilities, but his proposal made me uncomfortable. Michael wanted to issue shares that would give him 30% ownership, Sarah 25%, and leave me with 45%. "It reflects our actual contributions to the business," he argued. "You built the foundation, but Sarah and I are driving most of the growth now." I agreed to incorporate. That made sense for liability and tax purposes, but I retained 100% ownership of the stock. "When I'm ready to transfer ownership, we'll discuss it," I told them, "but I'm not ready yet." Sarah supported Michael's position, which surprised me. "Mom, we're not trying to push you out. We just want to feel like we have a real stake in what we're building together." What they didn't understand was that the business wasn't just my livelihood. It was my identity, my security, and my legacy. I had built MacGragor and Associates from nothing, through divorce, financial struggles, and years of 70-hour work weeks. The idea of giving up majority control, even to my own children, felt like giving up the thing that defined me over the next few years. This tension simmered beneath the surface of our family relationships. Michael and Sarah were excellent employees and contributed significantly to the company's continued growth, but they increasingly acted as if they were partners rather than employees, making decisions without consulting me and presenting unified positions on business strategy. That sometimes contradicted my preferences. In 2015, Sarah got married to David Chen. Yes, the son of Mrs. Chen, the woman who had given me my first $200 consulting fee 26 years earlier. It felt like a beautiful full-circle moment, and I was genuinely happy for Sarah. David was a good man with his own successful career in software development, but Sarah's marriage brought new complications to the family business dynamic. David had opinions about business strategy, and Sarah began incorporating his perspectives into her recommendations for the company. Suddenly, family dinners became informal board meetings where Sarah and David would present ideas for expanding into new markets or adopting new technologies. Michael also got married in 2016 to a woman named Jennifer who worked in corporate finance. Jennifer was smart and ambitious, and she quickly developed strong opinions about how MacGragor and Associates should be run. She would make comments like, "In my company, we would never handle client relationships that way." Or, "Michael, you should push your mother to be more aggressive about pricing." By 2018, I felt like I was being managed by my own children. Michael and Sarah would schedule strategy meetings where they would present carefully prepared proposals for changes to the business. They spoke in corporate jargon about maximizing shareholder value and optimizing operational efficiency. They had forgotten that the shareholder they were trying to maximize value for was me, and that the operations they wanted to optimize were systems I had developed through decades of experience. The breaking point came during our annual family business retreat in 2019. We had been holding these retreats for 5 years, originally as a way to step back from day-to-day operations and think strategically about the future. But this retreat felt different from the moment we arrived at the mountain cabin I had rented. Michael and Sarah had prepared a formal presentation titled MacGragor and Associates, a vision for the next decade. They had charts, financial projections, and a detailed plan for restructuring the company. The centerpiece of their proposal was a recommendation that I should step back from active management and assume a chairman emeritus role, while Michael became CEO and Sarah became co. "Mom, you've built something incredible," Sarah said, clicking through her PowerPoint slides. "But the business world is changing rapidly, and we need leadership that understands digital marketing, cloud-based accounting systems, and modern client relationship management." Michael nodded along. "You'll still be involved in major decisions, but day-to-day operations should be handled by people who are more in touch with current business practices." I sat there listening to my children explain why I was no longer qualified to run the company I had built from nothing. They used phrases like succession planning and generational transition as if my stepping aside was an inevitable natural process, rather than a choice I might or might not want to make. "What if I'm not ready to step aside?" I asked Michael, and Sarah exchanged a look that I didn't like. "Mom, we're not saying you have to retire completely. We're just saying that the company needs younger leadership to stay competitive. The company is more profitable now than it's ever been," I pointed out. "Our client retention rate is 94%. We've grown revenue by 15% each of the last 3 years. What exactly about our current performance suggests we need new leadership?" Jennifer, who had been quiet until this point, spoke up. "Linda, with respect, success in the past doesn't guarantee success in the future. The business consulting industry is being disrupted by technology and changing client expectations." I looked at my daughter-in-law, this woman who had been part of our family for 3 years, and realized she felt entitled to have opinions about the future of my life's work. "Jennifer, I appreciate your perspective, but this is a family business discussion." "Actually, Mom," Michael said, "Jennifer and David are family now. Their input is valuable because they have outside perspectives on our industry." Our industry. As if Michael and Sarah had built this business alongside me rather than joining it, after I had already established its reputation and client base. The retreat ended with an agreement to table the discussion and revisit it in 6 months. But I could see that Michael and Sarah had made up their minds. They were convinced that I was holding back the company's potential, and that they needed to take control to ensure its future success. Over the following months, I began to notice subtle changes in how they operated. They would schedule client meetings without informing me, make commitments to new projects without checking my availability, and refer to themselves as a leadership team in communications with staff and clients. In December 2019, I discovered that Michael had been having private conversations with our largest clients about upcoming changes in company leadership. When I confronted him about this, he was defensive rather than apologetic. "Mom, I was just preparing them for the transition we discussed. I didn't want them to be surprised when we announce your new role." "We haven't announced anything." "Because we haven't decided anything," I replied. "You're acting as if decisions have been made that haven't been made." "Mom, we can't keep putting this off forever. The business needs clarity about its future direction." That's when I realized that Michael and Sarah weren't asking for my permission to take over. They were informing me that they intended to do so, with or without my cooperation. The final confrontation came in February 2020, just before the pandemic changed everything. Michael and Sarah requested a formal meeting with me, and they brought Jennifer and David as advisors. They had prepared another presentation, but this one was different. Instead of asking me to step aside, they were telling me that they had already begun implementing changes. "Mom, we've been talking to a business attorney about the best way to structure the leadership transition," Sarah began. "We think the cleanest approach is for you to transfer majority ownership to Michael and me, while retaining a minority stake and a consulting role." I stared at my daughter, hardly believing what I was hearing. "You've been talking to an attorney about taking my business away from me?" "Not taking it away," Michael said quickly. "Transitioning it. You'll still benefit financially from the company's success, but you won't have the stress of day-to-day management." "What if I don't want to transition? What if I want to continue running the company I built?" Jennifer leaned forward. "Linda, I think you need to consider what's best for the business, not just what you want personally." The audacity of that statement took my breath away. This woman, who had never worked a day for MacGragor and Associates, was telling me to put the business ahead of my personal desires, as if the business weren't the product of my personal desires, my personal sacrifices, and my personal vision. "Jennifer, you need to understand something very clearly. This is my business. I built it, I own it, and I will make decisions about its future." David spoke up for the first time. "Linda, we're all family here. We all want what's best for the company and for everyone involved." "What's best for the company," I said, my voice rising, "is for people who don't work here to stop having opinions about how it should be run." Michael slammed his hand on the table. "Mom, this is exactly the kind of attitude that's holding us back. You can't accept input from anyone. You won't consider new ideas. And you treat anyone who disagrees with you like they're attacking you personally." "I'm not attacking you personally," Sarah added. "I'm trying to save the business we all love." Save the business, as if it were in danger from anything other than their attempts to take it over. "The business doesn't need saving," I said. "The business needs to be left alone to continue operating successfully under the leadership that built it." "Mom," Michael said, his voice taking on a tone I had never heard before, "we're not asking for your permission anymore. We're telling you that changes need to be made, and they're going to be made with or without your cooperation." The room fell silent. My son, the boy I had raised while building this company, The young man I had put through college and trained in every aspect of the business had just threatened me. "Are you giving me an ultimatum?" I asked quietly. "We're giving you a choice," Sarah said. "You can be part of the solution, or you can be part of the problem. But either way, this company is moving forward under new leadership." I looked around. The table at these for people, my children and their spouses, who had decided among themselves that I was no longer fit to run my own business. They had made plans, consulted attorneys, and prepared to implement changes without my consent. "I need some time to think about this," I said finally. "Of course," Michael said, his tone suddenly conciliatory. "Take all the time you need. But, Mom, please understand that we're doing this because we love you and we love the business. We want both to thrive." I left that meeting feeling like I had been mugged by my own family. The COVID-19 pandemic hit just 3 weeks after that disastrous family meeting, and suddenly everyone's priorities shifted dramatically. Businesses were closing, clients were struggling, and the entire economy was in freefall. The question of who should lead MacGragor and Associates became secondary to the question of whether MacGragor and Associates would survive at all. But the pandemic also gave me something I hadn't had in years: time to think clearly about my situation, without the constant pressure of daily business operations. As we transitioned to remote work and I found myself with fewer client meetings and administrative tasks, I began to really examine what had happened to my family and my business. I also used the time to do something I should have done years earlier. I consulted with my own attorney about the legal structure of MacGragor and Associates and my rights as the sole owner. What I learned was both reassuring and infuriating. As the sole shareholder of the corporation, I had absolute authority over all business decisions. Michael and Sarah were employees, well-paid, highly valued employees, but employees nonetheless. They had no legal right to make decisions about company leadership, ownership structure, or strategic direction without my approval. My attorney, Patricia Williams, was blunt in her assessment. "Linda, your children are attempting to stage what amounts to a corporate coup. They have no legal standing to force you out of your own company, but they're hoping you don't understand that or won't assert your rights." "But their family," I said. "Surely there's some obligation to consider their perspectives on the future of the business." "There's no legal obligation," Patricia replied. "And frankly, their behavior suggests they've forgotten that this is your business, not a family democracy." Patricia helped me understand that Michael and Sarah's conversations with clients about upcoming leadership changes could actually be considered corporate sabotage. If they were undermining confidence in my leadership without authorization, their consultations with attorneys about transferring ownership were premature at best, and potentially fraudulent if they had misrepresented their authority to make such decisions. "What are my options?" I asked. "You have several. You could terminate their employment immediately for insubordination. You could restructure their roles to limit their decision-making authority. You could sell the business to a third party and let them find new jobs. Or you could call their bluff and make it clear that you're not going anywhere." I spent weeks thinking about Patricia's advice. Part of me wanted to fire Michael and Sarah immediately and show them the consequences of trying to push me out of my own company. But they were still my children, and despite everything, I loved them and wanted to find a way to preserve our family relationships. The pandemic also gave me perspective on what really mattered. I watched small businesses fail all around us, saw entrepreneurs lose everything they had built, and realized how fortunate I was to have created something stable and profitable. MacGragor and Associates not only survived the pandemic, but actually grew as struggling businesses sought our help, navigating PPP loans, tax deferrals, and financial restructuring. My experience and relationships with clients proved invaluable during this crisis. While Michael and Sarah were focused on digital marketing strategies and operational efficiency, I was the one clients called when they were scared about their survival. I was the one who had lived through previous economic downturns and could provide perspective on how to weather the storm by the end of 2020. It was clear that reports of my obsolescence had been greatly exaggerated. MacGragor and Associates had not only survived but thrived under my leadership during one of the most challenging periods in modern business history. But Michael and Sarah seemed to interpret our success differently. Instead of acknowledging that my experience and leadership had been crucial during the pandemic, they argued that the crisis had proven the need for more agile, technology-focused leadership. "Mom, we got lucky during COVID," Michael said during one of our video conference meetings. "But the next crisis might require different skills." Lucky? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. We succeeded because we had strong client relationships, conservative financial management, and the experience to help our clients navigate uncertainty. That wasn't luck. That was good business. Sarah jumped in. "Of course your experience was valuable, Mom, but we also need to be preparing for the future, not just managing the present." It was the same argument they had been making before the pandemic, just repackaged for post-COVID realities. They were determined to push me aside regardless of evidence that my leadership was effective and valued by our clients. In March 2021, exactly 1 year after the pandemic began, Michael and Sarah requested another formal meeting. This time, they didn't bring their spouses, but they did bring something else: a formal written proposal for my retirement transition. The document was professionally prepared and legally reviewed. It outlined a timeline for transferring ownership and control of MacGragor and Associates to Michael and Sarah over a 2-year period. I would retain a 20% ownership stake and receive a consulting fee for 5 years. But I would have no decision-making authority over business operations. "Mom, we've put a lot of thought into this," Sarah said as she handed me the proposal. "We think this plan protects your financial interests while allowing the business to evolve under new leadership." I read through the document carefully. It was comprehensive and, from a financial perspective, relatively generous. But it was also non-negotiable. The proposal included a deadline. I had 30 days to accept the terms, or Michael and Sarah would pursue alternative arrangements for their continued involvement with the company. "What does that mean, exactly?" I asked. "Alternative arrangements?" Michael looked uncomfortable but pressed on. "It means we would leave MacGragor and Associates and start our own competing firm. We have relationships with most of our major clients, and we believe many of them would follow us." There it was, the threat I had been expecting. Accept their terms for pushing me out of my own company, or watch them destroy the business by taking the clients and leaving me with an empty shell. "You would compete directly with the company that trained you, employed you, and made your careers possible," I asked. "We would prefer to continue building MacGragor and Associates," Sarah said, "but we can't continue working under the current structure indefinitely." "The current structure where I own and run my own business?" "The current structure where decision-making is centralized, and there's no clear succession plan," Michael corrected. I set the proposal aside and looked at my children. Really looked at them. Michael was 42 years old, successful and confident. Sarah was 40, equally accomplished and determined. They had both benefited enormously from their association with MacGragor and Associates, earning salaries that were well above market rate and building reputations in the industry based on the company's established credibility. But somewhere along the way, they had forgotten that their opportunities existed because I had created them. They had begun to see themselves as co-founders rather than beneficiaries of my life's work. "I need to ask you both something," I said. "Do you remember how this company started?" Sarah looked puzzled by the question. "Of course we remember. You started it after your divorce. Do you remember why I started it?" "To support our family," Michael said. "Do you remember what it was like in the early years? The long hours, the financial uncertainty, the clients who couldn't pay their bills." "Mom, we were kids then," Sarah said. "We remember some of it, but we were too young to understand the business side. That was the problem. They remembered being children in the office, but they didn't remember the sacrifices, the risks, and the years of building something from nothing." To them, MacGragor and Associates had always been successful, always been stable, always been there. "I built this company to provide for your future," I said, "but I didn't build it to hand over to you on demand. I built it to be mine, to give me independence and security after your father left us with nothing." "Mom, we understand that," Michael said, "and we're grateful for everything you've done. But gratitude doesn't mean we should accept an inefficient business structure forever." Inefficient. My successful, profitable, growing business was inefficient because I retained control over the company I had built. "You have 30 days to consider our proposal," Sarah said, standing up to leave. "We hope you'll see that this is the best solution for everyone." After they left, I sat alone in my office, the same office I had first rented above the bakery 32 years earlier. Though we had moved to much nicer quarters since then, I looked at the photos on my desk. Michael and Sarah as children, helping me file papers and answer phones. My first business license. The newspaper article from 2010 when MacGragor and Associates was named Small Business of the Year by the Chamber of Commerce. I had built something remarkable, and my own children were trying to take it away from me. I spent the next week in intensive consultation with Patricia Williams, my attorney. We reviewed every aspect of the legal structure of MacGragor and Associates, my right as sole owner, and my options for responding to Michael and Sarah's ultimatum. "Linda, you need to understand that their threat to leave and start a competing business is serious," Patricia warned. "They do have relationships with your clients, and some of those clients might follow them. But they also have non-compete agreements," I pointed out. Patricia nodded. "Yes, but non-compete agreements are difficult to enforce, especially if they argue that you created a hostile work environment by refusing to consider reasonable succession planning." Reasonable succession planning? They're trying to force me out of my own company. I agree with you completely, but a court might see it differently, especially if they present evidence that you've been resistant to modernizing the business or sharing decision-making authority. We spent hours developing a strategy that would protect both my ownership rights and the business itself. The plan had several components, but the centerpiece was a comprehensive documentation of my contributions to the company's success and a formal restructuring of Michael and Sarah's roles to clarify the chain of command. "We're going to make it very clear that this is your company and they are your employees," Patricia explained. "If they want to leave, that's their choice. but they're not going to be able to claim that they were forced out or that you were an unreasonable owner. The first step was to conduct a formal review of Michael and Sarah's employment contracts and compensation packages. What I discovered was shocking. Over the past 5 years, I had been paying them salaries that were 40 to 50% above market rate for their positions. Michael was earning $180,000 annual plus, while Sarah was making $165,000 plus bonuses. Comparable positions at other firms in our area typically paid $120,000 to $140,000. I had been overpaying them out of generosity and family loyalty, but they had come to see these inflated salaries as their due rather than as gifts from a generous mother. The second step was to review their actual contributions to the company's profitability. While both Michael and Sarah were competent employees who brought value to the business, the analysis showed that my client relationships and business development efforts were still responsible for approximately 60% of our annual revenue. The clients they managed were largely accounts I had originally developed, and the new business they brought in was often referrals from my existing network. Armed with this information, I scheduled a meeting with Michael and Sarah for exactly 30 days after they had given me their ultimatum. But instead of responding to their proposal, I presented them with my own. I've given careful consideration to your concerns about the future of MacGragor and Associates, I began, and I've decided to implement some changes that I believe will address the issues you've raised. I handed them each a folder containing new employment contracts and organizational charts. Effective immediately, I'm restructuring your roles to better reflect your actual contributions to the company's success. Michael, you'll continue as senior accountant with responsibility for tax preparation and financial analysis. Sarah, you'll continue as client relations manager with responsibility for account maintenance and customer service. They opened their folders and I could see their faces change as they read the details. These positions come with salaries that are aligned with industry standards. $140,000 for Michael and $130,000 for Sarah. This represents a reduction from your current compensation, but it's still competitive for your experience level and responsibilities. Mom, what is this? Sarah asked, her voice tight with anger. This is a clarification of the actual structure of MacGragor and Associates. I am the owner and CEO. You are employees. These contracts reflect that reality. Michael was reading through his contract with growing agitation. You're demoting us and cutting our salaries because we asked for more responsibility. I'm correcting a situation where employees were being compensated and treated as if they were partners, when they're not. If you want to be partners, you can buy equity in the company at fair market value. If you want to remain employees, these are the terms. What's the fair market value? Sarah asked. Patricia had helped me get a professional business valuation. MacGragor and Associates was worth approximately $4.2 million based on its assets, client base, and earning potential. A 30% stake would cost $1 to $6 million, to $5 million. If you can arrange financing for those amounts, we can discuss partnership agreements. The silence in the room was deafening. Michael and Sarah clearly had not expected me to call their bluff so directly. Mom, you know we don't have that kind of money, Michael said finally. Then you don't have the resources to be partners in a multi-million-dollar business. You have the option to be well-compensated employees or to pursue opportunities elsewhere. This is ridiculous, Sarah said, standing up abruptly. You're punishing us for wanting to help the business grow. I'm clarifying the terms under which you can continue working for my business. The choice is yours." Michael and Sarah walked out of that meeting without signing their new contracts. For the next week, I heard nothing from them directly, but I began to notice signs that they were implementing their threat to leave and start a competing firm. They were having private conversations with key employees, scheduling meetings with major clients, and making copies of files and contact lists. When I confronted them about these activities, they were defiant rather than apologetic. "We're exploring our options," Michael said. "You've made it clear that there's no future for us at MacGragor and Associates under your leadership. You're welcome to explore options that don't involve stealing my clients and employees," I replied. "We're not stealing anything. We're leveraging relationships we've built over years of hard work." That's when I realized that Michael and Sarah had fundamentally misunderstood the nature of business relationships. They thought that because they had worked with clients, those relationships belonged to them. They didn't understand that clients hired MacGragor and Associates because of the company's reputation and my personal credibility, not because of their individual charm. 2 weeks after our confrontation, Michael and Sarah submitted formal resignations and announced the formation of Mitchell Chen Business Solutions, a direct competitor to MacGragor and Associates. They had convinced 3 of our junior employees to join them and had already begun soliciting our clients. I'll admit, I was scared. Losing to senior employees and having them actively compete for our clients was a serious threat to the business. But I was also angry enough to fight back with everything I had. The first thing I did was enforce the non-compete clauses in their employment contracts. Patricia filed for a temporary restraining order preventing Michael and Sarah from soliciting MacGragor and Associates clients for 6 months. The judge granted the order, ruling that their actions constituted a clear violation of their contractual obligations. The second thing I did was reach out personally to every major client to explain the situation and reassure them about the continuity of our services. What I discovered during these conversations was both surprising and gratifying. "Linda, we're sorry to hear about the family conflict," said James Morrison, CEO of Morrison Manufacturing, our largest client. "But we want you to know that our relationship is with you and MacGragor and Associates, not with Michael and Sarah. We've been working with you for 15 years, and we trust your judgment about how to run your business." Client after client expressed similar sentiments. They valued the stability and experience that MacGragor and Associates represented, and they were concerned about the reliability of a startup firm founded by disgruntled former employees. Within a month, it became clear that Michael and Sarah's exodus had not damaged MacGragor and Associates as severely as they had hoped. We retained 85% of our clients, and several actually increased their business with us as a show of support. But the real revelation came when I began reviewing the financial records more carefully in preparation for potential litigation. What I discovered was that Michael and Sarah had been systematically inflating their contributions to the company's success while minimizing mine. They had been taking credit for client relationships that I had developed, claiming responsibility for business growth that was actually driven by my strategic decisions, and presenting themselves to outsiders as the real leaders of MacGragor and Associates, while portraying me as a figurehead. Most damaging, I discovered that they had been having conversations with our bank about refinancing company debt and restructuring our credit lines, conversations that implied they had authority to make such decisions when they didn't. "Linda, this is serious," Patricia told me when I showed her the evidence. They've been misrepresenting their authority and potentially damaging your business relationships. You have grounds for a lawsuit that could shut down their competing firm and recover damages. But I didn't want to spend years in litigation with my own children. Instead, I decided to focus on rebuilding MacGragor and Associates and proving that the company was stronger. Without employees who didn't respect its leadership, the 6 months following Michael and Sarah's departure were among the most challenging and rewarding of my career. I had to rebuild our staff, reassure clients, and prove that MacGragor and Associates could continue to thrive without the children I had trained and promoted. I hired 2 experienced accountants to replace Michael and a marketing specialist to take over Sarah's client development responsibilities. Instead of trying to replicate the family business model, I focused on building a team of professionals who understood that they were working for my company, not trying to take it over. The new employees brought fresh perspectives and energy that I hadn't realized we were missing. They were grateful for the opportunity to work for an established firm, respectful of my experience and leadership, and focused on contributing to our success, rather than positioning themselves for a takeover. Our client base not only stabilized but actually grew. As word spread about the changes at MacGragor and Associates, business owners who had been considering our services were impressed by our ability to weather internal conflict and maintain high service standards. Several clients who had been working with larger, more impersonal firms switched to us specifically because they wanted to work with a company led by an experienced owner-operator. The financial results spoke for themselves. Despite the disruption of losing to senior employees, MacGragor and Associates had its most profitable year ever in 2021. Revenue grew by 22%, and our profit margins improved significantly because I was no longer overpaying family members who took their positions for granted. But the personal cost was enormous. Michael and Sarah had not spoken to me since leaving the company. They had turned their spouses against me as well, and I was no longer welcome at family gatherings or holiday celebrations. My grandchildren, Michael's 2 daughters and Sarah's son, were caught in the middle of a conflict they didn't understand. The isolation was painful, but it also clarified something important. I had built MacGragor and Associates, not just as a business, but as my identity and my security. Losing my children's respect was heartbreaking, but losing my life's work would have been devastating. Meanwhile, Mitchell Chen Business Solutions was struggling. Without access to MacGragor and Associates' established client base and reputation, Michael and Sarah were finding it difficult to build a sustainable business. The non-compete restrictions had limited their ability to poach our clients, and their startup costs were higher than they had anticipated. I heard through industry contacts that they were working longer hours for less money than they had earned at MacGragor and Associates, and that they were having difficulty competing with established firms that had better resources and more experienced leadership. Part of me felt vindicated by their struggles, but a larger part of me was simply sad. These were my children, and I had wanted them to succeed. I had offered them opportunities to be part of something successful and stable, but they had chosen to gamble on their own ambitions instead. 18 months after Michael and Sarah left MacGragor and Associates, I received an unexpected phone call from Michael. His voice was subdued, lacking the confidence and defiance that had characterized our last conversations. "Mom, I was wondering if we could meet for coffee. Just to talk." I agreed, though I wasn't sure what to expect. We met at a neutral location, a small cafe downtown that neither of us had been to before. Michael looked tired and older than his 44 years. How are you doing? I asked, genuinely concerned despite everything that had happened. Honestly, not great. The business is struggling, and Jennifer and I are having problems. She thinks I made a mistake leaving MacGragor and Associates. I waited for him to continue, not wanting to say anything that might shut down this first conversation we'd had in over a year. Mom, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. Did we really contribute as much to the company's success as we thought we did? The question surprised me with its directness and apparent sincerity. Michael, you and Sarah were valuable employees who contributed to the company's growth, but you weren't the driving force behind its success. That was my relationships, my reputation, and my business decisions accumulated over 35 years. He nodded slowly. I think I'm starting to understand that. When we left, we thought clients would follow us because they liked working with us. But most of them stayed with MacGragor and Associates because they trusted you and the company you built. It's not personal, Michael. It's business. Clients want stability, experience, and proven results. A startup firm founded by former employees doesn't offer those things, no matter how competent the founders are. Sarah and I thought we were being held back by outdated thinking and old-fashioned management styles. But maybe what we saw as limitations were actually strengths. I could see that this conversation was difficult for him, and I appreciated his willingness to be vulnerable and honest. Michael, can I ask you something? What did you think would happen when you gave me the ultimatum? Did you really think I would just hand over my life's work because you demanded it? He was quiet for a long time. I think we convinced ourselves that you were being unreasonable and that we were saving the business from stagnation. We thought you would eventually see that we were right and be grateful for our intervention. Did you ever consider that I might know something about running a business that you didn't? That my 35 years of experience might have value, that your business school education couldn't replicate? Honestly, no. We thought your experience was mostly outdated, and that fresh perspectives were more valuable than institutional knowledge. The arrogance of that statement was breathtaking, but I could see that Michael now understood how wrong he had been. Mom, I need to tell you something else. Sarah and I have been talking about dissolving Mitchell Chen Business Solutions. We're not making enough money to sustain the business, and we're both exhausted from trying to build something from scratch. What will you do? I don't know. Look for jobs with other firms, I guess. But it's going to be difficult. We have a reputation now as people who left a family business under contentious circumstances. I felt a mixture of sadness and vindication. My children had learned a hard lesson about the value of what they had given up, but the cost had been enormous for all of us. Michael, I want you to know that I never wanted things to end this way. I would have been happy to have you and Sarah continue working for MacGragor and Associates under reasonable terms. I know that now, but at the time, we thought reasonable terms meant giving us control over the business we felt we had helped build. You did help build it, but helping to build something isn't the same as owning it or having the right to control it. Our coffee meeting led to a series of conversations over the following months. Michael was genuinely remorseful about how he and Sarah had handled the situation, and he was beginning to understand the magnitude of what they had given up when they left MacGragor and Associates, and Sarah was slower to come around. She was still angry about what she saw as my refusal to share power and my punishment of their ambitions. But as Mitchell Chen Business Solutions continued to struggle, She began to acknowledge that their approach had been flawed. In the spring of 2023, both Michael and Sarah approached me about the possibility of returning to MacGragor and Associates. The conversation was awkward and emotional, with all of us trying to navigate the hurt feelings and damaged trust that had accumulated over the previous 2 years. "Mom, we know we made mistakes," Sarah said during one of our family meetings. "We let our ambitions cloud our judgment, and we forgot to appreciate what we had. We also know that things can't go back to the way they were." Michael added, "We understand now that this is your business and that we were employees, not partners." I had been thinking about this possibility for months, weighing my desire to rebuild our family relationships against my need to protect the business I had worked so hard to preserve. "If you came back, it would have to be under very different terms," I told them. "You would be employees with clearly defined roles and responsibilities. There would be no assumption of future ownership transfer, and no expectation that you would eventually take over the business." "We understand," Sarah said. "We just want the chance to be part of the family business again, even if it's not in the way we originally envisioned." After extensive discussions with Patricia Williams and careful consideration of the legal and practical implications, I decided to offer Michael and Sarah the opportunity to return to MacGragor and Associates, but the terms were very different from their previous employment. They would start in junior positions with salaries that reflected their actual market value and contributions to the business. They would have no decision-making authority beyond their specific areas of responsibility, and they would sign new employment contracts that included strict non-compete clauses and clear acknowledgement of my ownership and control of the company. Most importantly, they would have to earn back the trust and respect they had forfeited when they tried to force me out of my own business. Michael and Sarah accepted these terms, and they returned to MacGragor and Associates in the summer of 2023. The transition was not easy. There was tension and awkwardness as we all adjusted to the new dynamic, but gradually we began to rebuild our working relationships based on mutual respect rather than family obligation. The business continued to thrive under this new structure. Our clients appreciated the stability and continuity that came from clear leadership, and our employees understood their roles and expectations. Michael and Sarah worked hard to prove that they deserved their second chance, and over time, they began to regain some of the responsibility they had previously held. But the fundamental dynamic had changed permanently. They were no longer my potential successors or partners in building the business. They were employees who happened to be my children. This clarity, while sometimes painful, actually improved our relationships by eliminating the ambiguity and resentment that had poisoned our previous interactions. It's been over a year since Michael and Sarah returned to MacGragor and Associates, and I'm cautiously optimistic about the future of both our business and our family relationships. The company is more profitable and stable than it's ever been, with clear leadership structure and employees who understand their roles and value their positions. I'm now 67 years old, and I do think about succession planning and retirement, but on my own terms and timeline, not because of pressure from family members who want to take over. When I'm ready to step back from active management, I'll make that decision based on what's best for the business and my own financial security. I've also made changes to my estate planning that reflect the lessons learned from this experience. Instead of assuming that my children should automatically inherit the business, I've created a structure that will ensure MacGragor and Associates continues to operate successfully, Regardless of whether Michael and Sarah are involved, the business will be placed in a trust that can either be sold to provide financial benefits to my heirs, or continued under professional management if family members want to remain involved as employees rather than owners. This removes the pressure and expectation that my children must take over the business, while still providing them with financial benefits from my life's work. Michael and Sarah have both expressed appreciation for this approach. They understand now that inheriting a business is a privilege that must be earned through demonstrated competence and commitment, not simply claimed through family relationship. "Mom, I'm grateful that you gave us a second chance," Michael told me recently. "And I'm grateful that you didn't give up control of the business when we tried to force you out. We would have destroyed what you spent 35 years building." Sarah has been slower to fully acknowledge the mistakes they made, but she's beginning to understand the value of what they had taken for granted. "I thought we were being held back by your leadership," she admitted, "but I realize now that we were being protected by your experience and reputation. The personal relationships are still healing. We have family dinners again, and I'm able to spend time with my grandchildren without the tension and conflict that characterized our interactions for several years. But there's also a new level of respect and understanding that didn't exist before, and my grandchildren are old enough now to understand some of what happened. And I've tried to use our experience as a teaching opportunity about respect, gratitude, and the importance of appreciating what you have before you lose it." Grandma Linda, my oldest granddaughter, asked me recently, "Why did Daddy and Aunt Sarah try to take your business away?" "They didn't mean to take it away," I explained. "They thought they were helping it grow. But sometimes when people want something very much, they forget to appreciate what they already have." The business world has taken notice of our story as well. I've been invited to speak at conferences about family business management and succession planning, sharing the lessons learned from our experience. The key message I try to convey is that family businesses require clear boundaries and professional management, especially when family members are involved. MacGragor and Associates is now recognized as a model for how family businesses can maintain stability and growth while navigating the complex dynamics of family relationships and professional responsibilities. We've been featured in business journals and case studies as an example of successful crisis management and organizational restructuring. But for me, the most important outcome is that I retained control of the business I built and proved that experience, relationships, and steady leadership are more valuable than ambition and modern management theories. I showed my children and myself that I was not ready to be pushed aside, and that the company I created was stronger under my continued leadership than it would have been under their inexperienced control. They told me to leave the business I built from nothing. Instead, I reminded them who really owned everything they thought they could take. And in doing so, I secured not just my own future, but the legacy of MacGragor and Associates for generations to come. I'm Linda MacGragor. I'm 67 years old, and this is still my business.